Hello everyone, I am Young Duckman, Mind Lecturer from IMEI. A topic which I would like to talk with you today is the necessity and importance of thinking power. So how much does your thinking power affect your life? So we will study about this together today. So what do you think is this thinking power? So the thinking power, how can it be defined? It defines the power to think deeply, to meditate deeply. So then it's a strength of the heart. So to what extent can you think deeply? That strength is called your thinking power. So then as we study the necessity and importance of thinking power together, so we can divide the thinking power to the first level of thinking power and to the second level of thinking power. So firstly, let's think about what is the difference between the first level of thought and the second level of thought. Secondly, even though we face same problems, the essence of problems would be different depending on our thinking power. That's why I would like to talk about this part as well. Now, thirdly, there are some things that you fail on the view of the first level of thought, but it could be successful when you think about it in the second level of thought. And lastly, the more we think, the more various solutions come out for the same problem. So therefore, I would like to talk about this part too. And specifically, I would like to give some examples regarding the difference of a person who has a good thinking power and the person who does not. And I would like to talk about how much these kinds of people will influence our society. So now, firstly, I will talk about this particular person over here. So this person, it will be my first example about the person who has and who does not have a deep thinking power. And how much this affects a society. So right here, the first person, he is a German pilot called Lubisch. As you can see in the PPT, he's a very young pilot. So when he was a very young man, he became a pilot. And one day he went to see a doctor because he felt that his eyesight was becoming really bad. So when he went to the hospital and met the doctor, he got diagnosed by the doctor. But what the doctor told him, he said, "Oh, Mr. Lubitsch, you will lose your eyesight and you cannot treat this disease. So finally you will become blind." That is the diagnosis that he got. So to this man called Lubitsch, this was such a big shock. Hey, if I become blind, oh my God, if I become blind, if I lose my eyesight, then what will happen to me? I cannot pilot a plane either. So there was, in the first level of thought, a lot of despair and a lot of worries that came to him, and he fell deep into desperation. Oh, if I lose my eyesight, my life will be over. So then, what is the point of living without my eyesight? What is the point of living blind? I'd rather just die early. What to do? There is no way but to die. So then why should I die alone? Why should I die alone? Yeah, that's right. I will die together with all the passengers who board my flight. So because of such despairing thoughts, that led him to make a decision that he wants to die together with many other people. But then Lubitsch, he just gave himself up to these thoughts. So when he had the first level of thought, Lubitsch was just inside that first level of thought. And those thoughts, he thought that is everything to him. And that's why in 2015 March, so one day from Spain to Germany, to Düsseldorf in Germany, there was a flight that was flying. So in the German wings. So it was an A320 airplane. So then Lubitsch was also the captain, the co-captain of this flight. So when it was around, when the airplane was flying above the Alps near France, Lubitsch started to think that this is such a good opportunity, because that is when the captain went to the washroom. So in that time, Lubitsch went and locked the door of the cockpit, and he took hold of the stick, and in that, taking that chance, he started to crash his flight and descend into the Alps mountain. So the captain, as soon as he came from the washroom, he was so surprised. He tried to knock, he tried to open the door, but he couldn't do it, and the plane crashed into the Alps mountain. Do you know, 150 passengers all died on that flight. It was so bad an accident that they could not even find the corpses. It was such a sad incident. Now this young pilot called Lubitsch, just that first level of thought that one person had, that he wanted to die when he faced the problem of losing his eyesight. I have no hope of living. So that's why this big accident, such a sad incident happened. So he came to think, if he could only have a second level of thought, or even if I lose my eyesight, don't I have some other way? If he had some hope by thinking even a little deeper, then he would have been able to cross over to the second level of thought. So then he would not have killed not just himself, but so many other people whom he led into despair and sadness. Even this time, now there's a second person that I'd like to introduce to you. So now first let's watch this video, and after you watch this video, I will explain to you. Let's watch this video.
Which engines? He lost thrust in both engines, he said.
If you were in a hotel elevator, you'd be descending at 2 floors per second.
100 seconds after US Airways Flight 1549 takes off, it's in big trouble. Both engines have been wrecked by a flock of geese.
Hi, Cactus 1549. It's going to be left traffic to runway 31.
Unable. The only other place in the entire metropolitan area that we could even consider trying to land a large jet airliner on that was wide enough, long enough, smooth enough was the Hudson River.
Okay, which runway would you like at Teterboro?
We're going to be in the Hudson.
I'm sorry, say again, Cactus?
I think he said he was going to the Hudson.
If the water landing fails, it could easily end in catastrophe. Sully has just one shot at getting it right.
In the last seconds, I could see the world rushing up to meet us as we got closer and closer to the water. I said, "This is the captain, brace for impact." The landing felt hard. But once we'd stopped in the river, it was obvious that the airplane was stable, it was intact, it was floating.
Everyone, did you see the video well? So now the second person that I'd like to talk to you about, he is another kind of an airplane pilot. His name is Sullenberger, and he was a pilot in USA. So as you saw in the video, now this pilot Sullenberger, in the year 2009, on the 15th of January, so they had to make an emergency landing on the Hudson River. So he was a pilot of the US Airway. The US Airway Flight 1549 had taken off from the airport. But however, as soon as it took off, a flock of birds, they crashed into the propeller of the engine. So the engine stopped, and the flight, it started to descend. So as the engine started to stop, the plane began to descend into a crash. So the Sullenberger, he contacted the control tower, and both the engines are broken. The plane is crashing now. What should I do? So from the control tower, they said there is an airport nearby, so land at the airport. But he said, no, that's impossible. The plane would crash even before landing. So what will you do? So he said, there's the Hudson River just before we reach any other airport. So the Hudson River is just underneath our flight. So let's land on the Hudson River. So that's impossible because no flights have ever landed on the river, especially on the Hudson River. How is that even possible? So then Sullenberger told him, do you expect us all to die then? Even if it's impossible, we'll try to do this once. So that's how Sullenberger, this pilot, he made a landing on the Hudson River. So now, he said, everyone, he told all the passengers like this, everybody, our passengers, our flights, because of an engine problem, we are going to crash. But because we have no way, we're going to land on the Hudson River. So everyone, brace yourselves, bend down your heads, and believe the pilot, and please wait so that the flight will safely land. So all the passengers, they were, really holding their breath and praying and just waiting for the pilot to land. So in the end, after 20 minutes or so, very amazingly, that flight, as you see, it landed onto the river. And on the river, even though there was a big shock while landing, however, it landed safely. So that's why 155 passengers, all of them were rescued safely after this incident. So as you saw in the PPT, all of them could live. So that's why Sullenberger, so when he started to check the remains of the passengers, he was able to see after everybody got off the flight. So they said like this, we have done everything that we could do. So Sullenberger, there's a difference between Lubitz and him. Because Sullenberger, he did not just think about his first level of thought. If he'd done that, he would have felt like, there is no other way. Our flight is going to crash. We have to die. He would only have had that despairing first level of thought. But he came to think, no, it's not so. Over here, there will be some way. Even though it's a river, we can land over here. It's a river. We've never landed on a river, but that's okay. Let's try. Can we die with all our passengers? That's impossible, even if it's difficult. Let's do this once. And so when he had the second level of thought, so from him, he was able to have a lot of hope, and he was also able to have the trust that he was able to land that flight on the Hudson River. He did such a precious work, like a hero. Everyone, this is the difference between the Lubitz and between Sullenberger. So just the thinking power of one pilot, how many people can it give unhappiness to, and how many people can it give life to and happiness to? So you can all know about the difference so well. So now here, the next story, the next example or comparison that I'd like to show you is, over here there are two students. So I'd like to compare about these two students. So now this time they are Korean students. So in Korea there was a student called Jo Seung. So as you see, he is planning to commit suicide, right? He's holding a gun to his head. Now this Jo Seung-yi, when he was 8 years old, he moved to the US with his parents. And studying in the US, he entered into an engineering university in Virginia State. But when he was young, there was some problem in his English pronunciation. So he had a abnormally short tongue. So that's why his pronunciation was really bad. That's why when he would read English, his friends would make fun of him. And they would tell him, hey, one of his friends told him one day, they threw him an English book and they told him, hey, Jo Seung-yi, if you can read just one page of this English book, then I will give you $1. So he got so hurt when he was teased like that. So then he told them, hey, guys, stop teasing me like this. I'm not a person worth only for $1. I'm much more deserving. But when he was teased by his friends, he got so angry in his heart. Hey, if you think that I'm only worth $1, then I will also think that you are worth only $1. So you're just worth $1. Then I'll kill all of you. So this Jo Sung-yi, he made a plan to kill all of the students in his class. So he bought a gun and he made bullets inside. And he went into the classroom, and one by one he started to coldly shoot each of them without any fear in his eyes. So around 33 students were there in his class, and he killed all of them. And 29 other students and people, they got injured in that same incident. So this is called the Virginia Tech shooting. And it was a very big accident that made every American shocked. They were all so sad. Now this student, Jo Sung-yi, he had just this first level of thought. Why are you all ignoring me? I'm not worth just $1. If you think like this, I also will consider you just worth $1. When he was despised and teased by his friends, just simply, impulsively, that anger that was there inside of him, he had only that much thought. There was no second level of thought beyond that. If he could have thought in a second level, he would have had some other kind of thought as well, but he didn't have that capacity of thinking power. That's why not only himself, but so many other students, he also dragged them to death. Right now this next person over here is a female student. So her name is Lee Ji-sun. Now Lee Ji-sun, so as you see in the PPT, she looks so pretty, right? Her face was so pretty, and she was such a good speaker. She used to sing so well. So she was a student who was the best in everything she did, and she was studying in the finest women's university of Korea. So but one day, on the way going back home after finishing her classes, she was going back with her older brother in his car. So there was a car following behind them, and their car was stopped in the signal, but a car behind them at 160 kilometers per hour, a car just came and hit them from the back. So finally, this Lee Ji-sun, she fainted, but her car burst into flames. And because they were inside the car that had burst into flames, her whole body burnt. So even though she got countless operations, countless surgeries, her face was so terrible to look at. Her eyes had melted, her nose had melted, her mouth had melted, and she was not able to close her eyes, and she was not able to close her mouth. So if she would eat anything, everything leaked out. So from the hospitals, they did so many surgeries, and now that face that you see in the photo right now is what got healed after those surgeries. So this lady said she had a first level of thought. Hey, why is my life so miserable? I'd rather die than live like this. Why am I so difficult? Whenever she looked at her face or her body is completely rotten. I cannot live anymore like this. How can I live with this kind of a face, with this kind of a body? She used to cry every day, and she really wanted to die. So one day the doctor said, Miss Ji-sun, your fingers are all rotting, so you need to cut them off. If you don't, then not only your fingers, your whole body will start to rot. Now I have to cut all my fingers off as well. So she went into the surgery room in order to get her fingers cut. But suddenly she felt like someone was talking to her. Hey Ji-sun, you are so unhappy because of your horrible face. You were burned so badly. you think that that is only misfortune, right? But this misfortune, this difficulty, does not only give unhappiness to you, this can also give you happiness. You can even be more happy than before through this difficulty. All you have to do is be thankful. Why? Because although your whole body is burnt and you have so many scars, you're still alive. Just for the fact that you're still alive, you need to be thankful. So when a thought that she could never have before came into her, she felt that, this difficulty that came to me, it doesn't make me only unhappy. And even now I am so happy because I'm just alive. I'm so thankful that I'm alive. So her heart changed like this and she started to have a lot of hope. And then after that, she told the doctor, "Sir, just cut half of my fingers. Don't cut the whole thing off, just cut half." So then the doctors, they cut just half of the fingers. Now this Jisun, she told the doctor, "After we finish this surgery, I need to write a book. I need to even use the computer. So if I don't have all my fingers, then I can't use a computer, I can't write a book, I can't do anything. That's why just at least make half of it remain so that later on I can do all this." So they said, "Okay, fine." And they just cut off half of her fingers so that later on she could use computers and write books. So after the surgery, she wrote a book about how she was able to have hope even in the midst of so much unhappiness and misery. So there was a book about her life and it became a bestseller. So many people read that book. And especially the people who planned on committing suicide, as they read that book, what kind of a heart they had was, this Lee Ji-sun, this girl student, she was in much more difficulty than me. She was more in despair than me. Her life would have felt so much more pain than me. However, this girl student, she did not just have the thought that I should end my life here, I should commit suicide over here, I'm unhappy. But when she changed her heart to, this can also bring me happiness. This is not just misfortune. That's how she was able to change into a happy person. So when I compare to my life, my problems are nothing compared to this Ji-sun. So many people read this Lee Ji-sun's book and they gave up on suicide and they were able to have a new life and new hope. Now this Lee Ji-sun, when many people they met her, they tell, "Miss Ji-sun, thank you so much. Because of you, I was able to live." So one day a journalist asked Lee Ji-sun, so what he asked her was, "Ma'am, don't you want to go back to your beautiful and pretty appearance which you had before the accident?" But she said, "No. For me, I am enoughly happy with how I look right now. When I had a pretty face a long time ago, even with that pretty face, I could never give other people hope or happiness. I was not that kind of a person. But even though I have this scarred face, I can give hope and happiness to the people who meet me. I've become this kind of a person. So even with this kind of a face, I am enoughly happy." So that is what she told that reporter apparently. So I talked to you about Jo Seung-hee and Lee Ji-sun. I told you about both of these people, right? Now, there was a first level of thought. There was one student who had only the first level of thought. But there was another student who was able to have a second level of thought. So you can see how much difference these two things make. I've told you and explained to you about this. Everyone, this thinking power, how important it is for my life and how necessary it is for my life. Through these two examples, I think you would really have felt how important it is. Now the third part. So thirdly, I would like to talk about the advantages of having a good thinking power. Now thinking power is really good for our life. So what is the most advantage in our life because of thinking power? it is that in this world, all the wisest people, they are those who have great thinking power. And that is why this thinking power, more than anything else, it gives wisdom in my life. That is the advantage of thinking power. So I would also like to talk to you about a wise king in ancient China. There was a king named Zhang in China during the Zhou dynasty. So when his kingdom finally won peace, he threw a very big party in the palace garden because he was a really wise king. So after the war, he called all his nobles and he had a big party. So it was a happy time. And those days, they lighted candles, right? But there was a big gust of wind and all the candles blew out. So it was so dark all around. Suddenly this queen who was standing next to the king, and she started to shout and scream, "Oh, my highness, there's a scoundrel who kissed me on my lips. So I have torn off the strap of his hat. Your highness, quickly light up all the candles and find the person who has a strap missing. Seize him and behead him." So the king Zhang, when he heard what the queen said, he was so enraged. So he was so angry. And the first time when he heard what the queen said, he was so wrathful. How dare someone do such a thing? The king is standing right here. But even then someone kissed my concubine? How dare he? I have to kill this person immediately. That was the first thought that the king Zhang had. But in that short amount of time, this king Zhang, he thought a little more. When he thought a little more, hey, because of this, if I catch hold of that bad man, that bad noble, and I behead him, then what will happen to the atmosphere of this entire feast? It will become so scary and the atmosphere will be so bad. And he thought about his noble. He must be a young man. And my concubine is so beautiful. So even without himself knowing, he might have just kissed her. He's a young man. That is possible. But just because of that, if I directly behead him in front of everyone, then in the future, all the nobles who are with me, they'll be so scared of me. And they will always live in fear of me alone. So if I do this, then we will ruin the atmosphere of the feast today. And I will only become a scary king in the eyes of all my nobles. So we should just pretend as though nothing happened. So the king said, "Do not put on the lights. Everyone listen to me. So right now, everyone, all of you who have straps on your hats, tear it open and throw it in front of you. And then you can light the candles." So then they lighted the candles. Now nobody knows who kissed the queen. So then today is such a happy day. That's why today, let's not make a problem because of this happening. Let's just enjoy ourselves. That's what the king announced. So after that happened, 3 years passed by. So after 3 years, there was a war with a neighboring country called the dynasty of Jin. So the soldiers of the Jin dynasty were so powerful that the Zhou dynasty was not able to win over them. So this King Zhang, he was in so much difficulty. But as they were fighting with the dynasty of Jin, there were no commanders, there were no generals who could fight the war and win against the dynasty of Jin. So the king made an announcement saying, "Is there no one who can help me?" But at the time a young man came to the king and said, "Oh king, please choose me. I will fight with them and I will win." That's why to this young general, the king, he gave him all the power. So when the king saw, this young general was not at all afraid. It was as though he had made a decision that he would die and he was fighting. That's why what the dynasty of Jin, those soldiers could not even have imagined. He started to fight against them like that. And finally he won in that war. So the king called this general to him and he told him, "Hey, when I look at you, you are fighting without even being afraid for your life. Why are you not even afraid for your own life? So he said, King, please kill me. I already around 3 years back, I'm a person who should have died. At that time, I am a person who should have died. And then he confessed, saying how he had kissed the queen 3 years back during the feast. At that time, my king, you kept me alive. From then on, my life is no longer my life, but it was your life. From then on, I thought like that. And that's why no matter when it is, I lived with the resolution that I am willing to lay my life down for you. So then today was a happy day when I was able to actually give my life for you. And I was not at all afraid. That's how I fought. So even though I would have won this war, and even though I am still alive, I am a person who should die. My king, please kill me. So in the King Jang's heart, because he had a second level of thought that made wisdom for him. And that's how he made such a loyal servant, such a loyal noble, and he made the atmosphere of the whole country so good. Everyone, this thing called thinking power, it's so advantageous in order to make wisdom. Why? Because when you are able to have a deep thinking power, then wisdom grows. And now the last thing I would do is about the method of increasing your thinking power. So how can you increase your thinking power? There are so many different methods. But then today, I'll just tell you three important parts about it. Now the first is to forsake your fixed concepts. And the second thing is to raise a habit of thinking deeply. And now the third thing is to communicate with people who have better thinking power than me. So firstly, to improve your thinking power, so it is so important to throw away your fixed concepts. Among all these three things, these are the most important tenets of when you have to increase your thinking power. Everyone, in this world, something new, something amazing, there are so many people who discover that. So do you know who is the king of invention? So just like you see in the PPT, so it's Thomas Alva Edison. So he was called the king of inventions. So for a while I'd like to talk to you about this Thomas Edison. Now Edison, he invented so many different things, and among that, the bulb. He invented the bulb. Now when he made this bulb, he failed so many times, hundreds and hundreds of times. Why? Because it was not so easy to make a filament from carbon. So using so many materials, they failed again and again, but finally they were able to make the filament. And one day, a journalist came to Edison and asked him, "Sir, you failed so many times. Whenever you failed, how did you feel?" But Edison told him, me, I discovered just so many ways which did not work. So Edison never thought about his failures as failure. He said, I was just able to eliminate that many ways which would not work. So because this is eliminated, this cannot be used, he used another material again and again. He used so many hundreds of materials that wouldn't work. So that's how this Edison was able to become the king of inventions. It means he never thought that this is not working. He never thought that this is failure. So until he invented, he did not get exhausted. He was a person who just kept on trying. And Edison also invented the gramophone. So Edison made these gramophones. And at that time, what people thought was like this. Sounds are something that disappear. You cannot hold sound, you cannot record sound. That's what people thought. But now Edison thought about it. Our voices, our sound, is it something that just disappears? we are not able to hold on to it? No, that's not so. Even sounds, we can gather it together and we can record it. We can save it. So he started to think, how can we gather these sounds? And that's how one by one he made the gramophone. Everyone, these kings of invention, what kind of thought they have was, until now, everyone else had thought, sounds just disappear, you can never record it. That's what people thought, that was a fixed concept. But this inventor, he thought, no, that's not so. It can be wrong. So he turned that fixed concept upside down and he made a new method. He tried to discover something by which he could record sound. So if you had not thrown away your fixed concepts, then he could never have discovered something new. So until now, there are so many great people in this world, and those great people until now, they have a fixed concept, but they would never live within that fixed concept. They all lived breaking free of those fixed concepts in the society, and that's how they became great. Everyone, if you can upgrade your thoughts from the first level of thought to the second level of thought, that means from your first concepts of that are fixed, if you can come out and enter into a second level of thought, a newer level of thought, then you can find out new ways. Everyone, until now I thought like this, but even that is not all. Through new things. So when you think new things at that time, you can have a second level of thought. And now what is the second thing? Secondly, you have to have a habit to think deeply. You need to have a habit, just like, Isaac Newton. So Isaac Newton is a great person in human history because he also found out about the law of gravity, right? So for humanity, he did really great service. So he's a very famous scientist. And one of the days, in 1655, so he was just thinking, he was meditating, sitting under a tree. So that was 1655. And he was sitting under the apple tree or a tree, and he was just looking at the moon. So when he was just thinking, suddenly an apple fell down. So he saw that apple falling down, and when he saw it, he came to think, oh, an apple falls. All materials fall down if you don't have a strength that holds it up. So the apple, if the branch lets it go, then it falls down. But in the moon that is in the sky, why is it not falling down? The apple falls down, but the moon doesn't fall down. Why is it so? So then between the moon and between the apple, they both have the strength from the earth that is pulling at them. Then what is the reason why that moon does not fall down? It's because the moon is revolving, because it revolves. And that's why it does not fall down. So if that same rule can be applied to both, that what is revolving cannot fall down, then is it only the moon? No, there are so many things that are revolving and rotating in orbit around the sun. All those objects, they're still in the sky, in space, without falling down, without falling into the sun. Then there is some same rule that is applicable to all of these things. So that was known. Just as the law of gravity. So as he just had that one thought, the apple falls down, but why does the moon not fall down? Now this discovery that he made, it was so helpful in the further development of science. Everyone, all of us, we just think very lightly. We just don't have anything deep thoughts. But for us to train or make a habit of thinking deeply, then only when our thoughts become deeper and deeper, we are able to think about the things that we could not think about before. when you start to think about such things, your thinking power also increases. And then finally, among the things that increase your thinking power, I feel like this third thing is the most important. Why? It's when you interact or communicate with people who have better thinking power than you. So everyone, all of you, especially the Japanese people, they raise a special fish called koi. So it's called the koi fish. So it's a very pretty, very beautiful fish. So when you put this koi fish in a fish bowl or an aquarium, it grows only about 5 to 8 centimeters. But the same koi fish, if you take it out from the fish bowl and put it into a pond, it can grow up to 15 centimeters. Now this very same koi fish from the pond, if you remove it to a river, it can grow up to 120 centimeters. Now this koi fish, depending on the place where it lives, it grows, its size is different. So in this way, our thinking power is just like a fish bowl. So this my thinking power, or my first level of thought, is just the same as a koi fish living inside the fish bowl. So if I only have the first level of thought, then my thinking power will never improve if I just live within my thought. Now, in order to improve your thinking power, you have to communicate with another person who has a thinking power that I cannot have. A person who is better than me. When I interact with them, then the koi fish who are there inside the fish bowl, who can grow only up to 8 centimeters, they can grow up to 120 centimeters in the river. In the same way, our thought process increases. So as I show you in the PPT right now, this is a man called Warren Buffett. So he is one of the best investors in the world. And if you want to meet this person and have one lunch together with him, you need to spend a lot of money because he's such a world famous investor. So once in a year, he has a time for someone to have a meal with him. So in China, there's a man called Zhao Dang. So he paid such a big amount of money in order to have lunch with him. He paid nearly $2,110 million just for having lunch. But after he had lunch, this Chinese businessman Zhao Dang, when he had lunch with Warren Buffett, talking to him just for a few hours, he was able to ask so many questions about how he should invest and what kind of value you will get from what kind of investments. Now this Zhao Dang, he actually paid $2,110 million to eat lunch, but practically after he came back to his own company, he was able to increase the profits made by his company to many more times, and he actually got a profit out of it. Why? Because when he heard from Warren Buffett about not only personal finances but even about his company, about economics, about investments, his life completely changed. Even if you want to improve your thinking power, then you need to interact with a person who has a much better thought power than you. Then that person's thought power becomes my thought power. So then, just like the koi fish, the fish in the fish bowl can only grow up to 8 centimeters. But when it enters into the river, it becomes a 120 centimeter fish. So when you meet a person who has a better thinking power than you can interact and grow. And my thinking power grows so many times more like this. So today, I talked to you about the necessity and importance of thinking power. So if you improve your thinking power after listening to my lecture, so you will come to know how important and necessary it is. And you will have a heart that you have to improve your thinking power. So I truly hope that you will increase your thinking power and think much bigger. And that will make you much happier in your life and wiser in your life. And you will have the best life It'll change our lives completely. So thank you. I'll finish over here.